He had a drinking problem. He was an alcoholic. He would always say, I'm going to stop drinking this time. Well, he never did. When I was 18, I was just at my friend's house. She said, did you know that he's dead? And he was really unhappy, so maybe he committed suicide. I just blamed myself. Everything's falling apart, but I just didn't want to do anything. I kind of gave up. I don't know what happened. Go to the doctors and the doctor would say, you're on a path to self-destruction. You're doing this to yourself.
I've just come back from an incredible podcast interview here in the Warrior Academy with Jasmine Navarro. Jasmine has an incredible history of teaching young people, having been a teacher in over 11 countries around the world and now based here in the UAE as a family and teen coach. So Jasmine really dives into this incredible story of her past, how she managed to process trauma as a young person, how she fought through depression, and how really when she looks back, better communication as a family would have helped her, and how she's on a mission to help families improve their communication at home. Do not miss out on this episode. As a parent, you're going to absolutely love the information and insights that Jasmine shares with you today. So welcome, Jasmine, to the Warrior Academy podcast.
Thank you, Seb. Thank you so much for having me.
Before we start, one of the things I love to do is just to invite you just to share a little bit about who you are and what you do for those at home.
So I'm Jasmine, and I'm a certified wellbeing expert, and I work with parents, children and teens, helping them with all aspects of their wellbeing.
Brilliant. And you're also now partnered with the Warrior Academy to help our parents and our students as well, which is something that I'm really excited to talk about later on today as well. What I think is really fascinating is why people do what they do in the first place. You've obviously got an incredible history in terms of teaching. I've never met an expat teacher who's taught in more than 10 countries. I think it's 11 countries, right? That you taught children around the world. That's amazing. You've also got a fascinating background and childhood story as well. Now you're throwing your life into teaching and coaching families through difficult things like developing confidence and so on. I would love to start back where it all began, your childhood. Tell me about your life growing up in the UK.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So my life in the UK. So yeah, I think I just remember a lot of my childhood, it was just me, my mum and my brother. My real dad was from Venezuela. So he was in and out. My mum and him divorced when I was 2, so he was sort of in and out of my life. We would go and visit him in Venezuela. He would visit, but he wasn't there all the time. My mum then met somebody else when I was 8, and he obviously wasn't my dad, but we had a really close relationship, like a really strong connection. And I just always remember that when he came into our lives, he said, I'm not your dad, but if ever you want to call me dad, I would be honoured for you to call me dad. And I was like, no way, because I felt like I was betraying my real dad. But then I think after time, it just came natural to me to start calling him dad. And as soon as I did, I was just so close to him. I don't know, we had this amazing connection. And I always still feel that now, actually. And I don't know why we had this connection, we just did. Maybe because he wasn't my real dad and it was just all through choice, I don't know. But I feel like he had a big impact on my life. He was funny. Anyway, we had such a great relationship, but also he had a drinking problem. He was an alcoholic. So a big part of my childhood, I just remember him always going into rehab, and me and my mum and brother going to visit him, and he would always say, I'm going to stop drinking this time. And he never did. He couldn't. I mean, he had quite a troubled childhood as well. But so in the end, when I was about 14, my mum, just decided to separate from him because he couldn't stop drinking, and it was just causing a lot of problems in our family. And my mum, she worked really hard as well. She had 3 jobs. Anyway, and it was just too much,
3 jobs as well. So from the age of 14, your mum was working 3 jobs?
Well, I think even before,
really?
She was working really hard. I just remember her always working extremely hard.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
1 brother.
1 brother, okay.
Yeah. So they separated when I was 14, and that was a really difficult time. It was just sad because I didn't really see him then. You know, he went on to meet somebody else. But then the thing was, when I was 18, I was just at my friend's house, and she just said one day, as if, do you want a cup of tea? But she said, did you know that he's dead? And, you know, I was...
So your stepdad, who you basically you felt like was your main father figure, that's when you found out he had passed away, while you were at a friend's house.
Yeah, and it was just so casual, and I think that really... Of course, I don't know how I would have felt if I had have had a bit of warning. I don't know, but the shock of it, then the trauma, and because it was just so casual, as if I wouldn't really care because he wasn't my dad or something. Anyway, I went home, told my mum. She rushed out to get the newspaper, and then she said, it's true, he's not coming back. And, you know, he was really unhappy, so maybe he committed suicide. So
you don't actually know how he died or anything like that?
No, I do now, but so at the time, so I just thought, he's committed suicide. And, you know, those words were so, like, important for me. So I just blamed myself. So I blamed myself. So I had all this guilt, because I remember we'd seen him a year before. He had wanted to meet us for coffee, but we'd said no. Anyway, so I had all these feelings. I don't know how many feelings I had, so many. And then that was it. We didn't really talk about him again. And everybody was just getting on, you know, like with their lives. You know, my friends, you know, they were 18, so they were just talking about going out. And I was just like, but everything's falling apart.
So like your dad's died and life is going on, you know, as if nothing's happened around you, yeah.
Exactly, and I was gradually losing my confidence. I was working as a receptionist at the time, and I was just losing my confidence. I just didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to do anything. And then my job, they gave me some time off because obviously what had happened. But I just didn't want to do anything. I kind of gave up. I don't know what happened, but, well, I was depressed. You know, I would go to the doctors, and the doctor would say, you're on a path to self-destruction, you're doing this to yourself. So I was obviously depressed and sad because of what had happened, but I was also blaming myself, and that's what was making me depressed. But I couldn't stop, even though I sort of knew it was probably true, but I couldn't stop it. So I just got worse and worse, and obviously my mum was so worried. It was affecting my brother. It was just...
How old is your brother at this stage?
He's 5 years younger than me, so he must have been 13, and it was affecting him at school.
Yeah.
Like,
so I can imagine, you know, both of you going through that massive shock then, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Did it have the same impact on him as it had on you? No. Worse, or?
No, not...
You had a closer connection to the...
I think so.
Yeah.
I had a closer connection. Yeah. And to be honest, to this day, I don't know how it affected him. Because I was just thinking about me at that time, and even now we haven't spoken about it.
Really?
Yeah. It just, and because he wasn't my dad, I didn't feel like I deserved to feel what I was feeling. So there was just so many things going on, layers and layers. Yeah.
Set of emotions there, right? Like,
yeah.
You know, the whole kind of stepdad thing makes it very confusing for you, I think.
I think so.
You know, it brings it down to what is a father, right? Is a father someone who's blood related, or is it someone who's a father figure who comes into a child's life? And we teach so many single mums, and some of our instructors, they really become a father figure to the child, right? Even though they're only seeing them a couple of times or a few times a week. Because for a lot of kids growing up, that can be their only, especially primary school kids, most of the teachers are female, in the UK at least. And so that can be their only male role model that they see every single week. And you imagine a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old boy in particular, that then becomes, you know, such an important part of their life, because it's like, this is how you need to grow up, this is how you should, you know, become a male, become an adult man. It's like, that's the direction they're showing you. So I can, you know, from my perspective, you know, there are a lot of incredible male role models who take on a father figure for young people, even though they're not related. That's true. And I still look back and I think, how come I was so close to him? I just think we understood each other. Yeah. We just had we connected. That's probably why it was so hard for me, because maybe I'd never connected with anybody like that before or since, actually. Interesting, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. So 18 years old at this stage, you're working as a receptionist, you've obviously had this difficult last 4 or 5 years in particular, and now you've got this news. What then happened? The next kind of 5 years for you, because I know that you kind of fell into depression at this stage, didn't you?
Yeah, so it was gradual. I just started getting worse and worse and just losing my confidence. And then my mum was like, "You're losing your confidence." And then I think because I could see her worrying, then I felt even more guilty.
Right.
And then my brother not doing so well at school. That just, anything that happened, I just turned it round to make myself feel worse.
Right,
So whatever was going on, I interpreted it as it was my fault. So I was in that frame of mind where I was just spiraling, and I got really, I couldn't get out of bed. I mean, it was clinical. I was clinically depressed. But now I look back, I think it was trauma, actually. It probably wasn't depression. But anyway, so...
It was the shock, maybe. Yeah. It was the unprocessed shock of you going through that, and then, several years not actually having to work through it, but instead just trying to deal with the mix of emotions over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, and just blaming myself. That was the thing. So I had periods when I was feeling okay. So then I would, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to, because I hit rock bottom, I don't know how many times, but I was like, okay, right, now I'm, the only way is up, okay, let's do this. And then I would feel okay, and that's when I would start planning, okay, what do I need to do with my life? Okay, I think it's good if I leave the UK, maybe become a teacher, and I can travel the world, and I can get out of this situation. My mum always encouraged me to travel, and just take chances, just do whatever you need to do, and she wanted me to have a better life than she did. So, and I wasn't scared of traveling or anything like that. So when I was feeling okay, I would plan this. And, sometimes I would go away, I would come back. I would come back because then I'd get depressed again because I hadn't got to the root of the whole depression. But then I trained as a teacher. But before then I had depression quite a few times, and I got better quite a few times. It's quite complicated, and actually even thinking about it now, I'm just trying to remember. But I know it took me about 4 or 5 years to realise and admit to myself why I was depressed.
Yeah.
So that took a long time because I didn't have therapy or anything. And then it took another 3 years to realise it wasn't my fault. And when I realised that it wasn't my fault, I never got depressed again.
Interesting. So it's like there was a realization moment which just, after that point,
never again.
You stopped feeling depressed, right? It was like, okay,
yeah,
I'm not depression. I'm not this. That is not my identity, right?
It's not my fault.
Yeah, and it's not the guilt or blame that you kind of put on yourself.
Yeah.
Disappeared when you accepted that was out of your control. It wasn't to do with you.
Exactly, but it's like, it just shows you, maybe there was trauma in the shock as well, but it just shows you the words I was saying to myself were literally killing me. Not killing me, but destroying everything. Just my words.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was.
I feel like we're always being trained by an inner voice, right? There's always like an inner coach in our heads. And you and I were talking about the power of our own voice healing ourselves. And,
yes.
And it's interesting how often that voice can be a negative voice, and it can force people into this downward spiral because of some belief they've got.
Yeah.
What do you think is the main reason most people go through depression in the first place?
An incident could have happened,
like a one-off incident, which then changes the way in which they think, or?
I think so.
Yeah.
But maybe it depends. Like, I think if I'd have had more emotional awareness and a bit more of a healthier foundation with my well-being, I might have been able to cope differently. I think I was quite an insecure teenager anyway, probably because of everything that was happening with my dad, maybe. I wasn't like really self-confident anyway. So that was just, I couldn't handle it at all. But I think definitely, sorry, I'm just losing what you said.
I think a lot of it is, when it comes to depression, it's like, we can't always prevent horrible things happening in our life. We can't prevent trauma, but a lot of it comes down to how we are able to emotionally process things, I think.
Yeah.
It's if you're in a position where you can, you've got the emotional maturity to understand what's going on, analyze something, process it, and not necessarily take blame for things that are outside of your control, then I think you're in a better position to go through something traumatic without it then causing depression. Or the kind of lingering on of that. Exactly. But that age, you just can't, right? 14 to 18, that is a really tough age to have to process something, as difficult as you went through.
I think so, and I didn't have any emotional awareness, and like I said, I wasn't very self-confident. Maybe if I'd been more self-confident,
Yeah.
I don't know. Or we'd have had effective communication because we didn't really talk about it. My mum didn't know how to talk about it.
So she was going through it as well, maybe. And
So then when you're not talking, you're just thinking even more, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I think there was no conversations. Yeah, it could even be a comment from somebody.
Yeah.
And if you're not feeling very confident anyway, you can spiral, can't you? Because then it's how you interpret that comment. If you're happy with yourself, you might just brush off the comment. But if you're already feeling I'm worthless or I'm not good enough, that could be the final thing that makes you just really believe it, and then you just go further and further.
Yeah, definitely. So
one word, yeah.
So at this stage in your life, you then decide you want to become a teacher, right? You want to work with young people, and what was it that caused you to, or kind of motivated you to go on that route?
Yeah, well, because I thought, how can I leave the UK?
So the whole thing was about escaping the UK, right?
Exactly. So, I know, it's so extreme.
So, right,
when
okay,
you think
cool.
about
So you're going to leave the UK, become a teacher, and that was the best option. It was like, cool, going to start teaching. And the first teaching gig was...
in Turkey. This was the easiest option because I didn't have a degree.
Okay.
I did not have a degree because I was depressed most of my teens. Yeah. I was like, what can I do? How can I... So I did a teaching course. On the course, I met 2 Turkish girls. They said, why don't you come to Turkey? And I said, with my other friend, okay, if you go, I'll go. So we said, okay, let's just go. So we went to Turkey, and that's where I got a lot of experience teaching adults mainly. I was there for 18 months. Yeah, and that's when I started processing a lot of the grief as well, because I was talking to other people. Even though they weren't as close to me as my friends in the UK, we were having like effective communication. We were talking about things, and I think all of these conversations helped me realize what I was going through as well. So I started reflecting, and I realized things, but it took a while. And then I always wanted to go to Switzerland. In fact, that's why I did the teaching first, because I wanted to live in Switzerland. That's where it all came from, actually. But then I ended up going to Turkey first, and then after Turkey, then I went to Switzerland.
Okay.
And then in Switzerland, I realized everybody was speaking like 4 or 5 languages, and I was like, I don't even have a degree, I don't speak any other languages. So I thought, okay, let's start with another language. Let's learn Spanish, because my dad is from Venezuela. I don't speak his language. So then I worked in Costa Rica for 3 years.
Wow. How's your Spanish now?
Well, it was really good at that time. I was advanced. I took like exams and everything, but now I don't know.
You lose it, right? So
exactly. I haven't spoken it since 2010.
Yeah, I feel the same way about it. I lived in Denmark for about 1.5 years.
Oh, really?
I got to the point where I was pretty much fluent. Like I could have a really good conversation, no problem at all. And now it's just, it's one of those things that you've got to really be immersed in it for a while for it to kind of come out again.
Exactly.
So you've got to use it or lose it, right?
You're right, and it's hard to learn a language.
Yeah, really, it definitely is. So, okay, cool. So now you're an expat teacher traveling around the world teaching, right? And you, at that stage, you were Turkey, Switzerland, then Costa Rica for 3 years, and then there were 11 countries you were teaching in?
Yeah, so including those, and then I thought, okay, I need to get my degree.
Right.
So I studied for my degree online, so that was like 5 years, but I was going through different countries. I must have lived in about 3 countries when I was doing that degree. Then I went to Morocco.
Okay.
And I started studying.
Was that a bit of a culture shock from Costa Rica and Europe, or?
It was a little bit, because I had lived in Turkey.
Okay, yeah.
And I was quite young when I was in Turkey. So I think that sort of helped me, yeah. Because it wasn't my first different sort of culture, different country.
What were the biggest insights you would say you gathered from working in so many different countries, would you say? Because a lot of people, they become an expat teacher and they work in 1 country or maybe 2, but to work in over 10, what do you think you really picked up from that experience?
I always think about this. I think, if you respect people and you're kind, that's it. You can be okay in any country. That's what I learnt.
Like a universal language.
Exactly.
Kindness, yeah.
Exactly, kindness and respect. That's what I learnt. You don't need to speak the same language, because I didn't learn all of those languages.
Yeah.
So yeah, kindness and respect. I know that sounds really simple, but that's what helped me. And being open But it's about being respectful, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's it. So those two things.
I was asked the other day, what's the most important thing that we can teach kids? And because obviously education's evolving massively, right? AI is coming in, so now it's like, they need to start learning about AI from the age of 4 onwards and all this sort of stuff. And someone asked me, what's the most important thing we can teach kids in a massively changing environment from an educational point of view and technology point of view? And I said, the things that stand the test of time. And the things that stand the test of time, irrespective of technology, are values, right? Character traits.
Yeah.
Attributes like the things we focus on at the Warrior Academy: confidence, conduct, concentration, respect, having a moral compass, kindness, right? Developing emotional intelligence, soft skills. Doesn't matter how much AI you've got to support you in whatever field you enter a career in or a business in or whatever, having that strong foundation for me is the most important thing. So yeah, I can completely understand and relate to that.
Yeah, exactly. The simple things.
Yeah. So okay, cool. So then I know we're like jumping over a decade here, but you had this incredible career teaching around the world. Then you ended up in Saudi Arabia for a long time, I believe.
Yeah, I was there.
A year in Saudi Arabia, and then you moved to the UAE. How long have you been in the UAE now?
8 years.
8 years in the UAE. Okay, cool. So this is the longest time you've stood still.
Exactly.
Okay. You're not going anywhere. Not today, anyway, at least. No. So, okay, cool. So, travel the world, lots of countries, ended up in the UAE. In the UAE, what is it you were doing? For a long time, you were teaching as well? Just a quick shout out to the guys at Shield who manage this podcast, come up with the strategy behind the podcast, help me schedule interviews, as well as do all of the editing and the producing of the podcast. Without them, we wouldn't be able to produce this podcast. If you would like to create your own podcast, I can't recommend the Shield team enough. They have done well over 100 episodes for me over the last few years, and I've been so pleased with the results. So have a look in the description of this video or the podcast episode, and you'll see how to get in touch with them yourself.
Yes, I came here as a teacher, and I don't know what happened when I arrived here, but I don't know if it was the time or the place, but as soon as I came here, I just felt like I could sort of relax. I knew I wasn't going to go anywhere. I knew this was going to be the place I'd stay for a long time. Yeah. And that's when I looked back on my life, and that's when I realized that it was 17 years then, 11 countries. And I just thought, where's the time gone for a start? And I do not want to keep doing this moving forward. Like, of course it was amazing, but it was tiring as well, because I did most of it by myself. Yeah. Going to a new country, all the things you have to do and learn about. So I just thought, no more. But what can I do? Because I knew there was something else I needed to do, but I didn't know what. I didn't want to teach anymore, to be honest. I just felt like I loved teaching, being with students and things, but I wanted to teach something more meaningful. Mm-hmm. So I thought, what can I do? And then at that moment, the next few months, I just kept meeting co-active coaches. So I thought, this must be a sign. So I thought, okay, I will do the training, because then I can work on myself, and then I can maybe find out what I need to do. Yeah. So that's how that happened. So I did the training, and of course, I found it so difficult, because you're working on yourself in front of 20 people. Yeah. So for me, it was just horrendous. But I knew I just had to keep going. And every day my heart was beating. I didn't enjoy it at all, but I knew this is the way. And then at the end of that, I thought, this is what I need to do. You don't need to travel the world. You can work on yourself, all of those things. So I got certified the following year, and then I started coaching adults. But then I thought, I need to work with teenagers, because if I had had some of these tools and techniques when I was a teen, maybe things would have been easier for me, because I wasn't prepared at all. I don't know how you can prepare for some things, but I think it does help. Kind
of your life coming full circle again. Right, and it's like now you're looking after the kind of younger you almost, right? Exactly, yeah. If you were looking at it from that perspective, if you were to coach yourself back then, what would you have done differently? At the age of sort of 14 to 18, when you were going through all of that?
I know, it's funny, because I ask myself this question a lot, and I just think it's really hard. I just think more real conversations. If I'd have had more real conversations and realised that the sadness that I was feeling, especially with my dad, my stepdad, even before he passed away, just when he was in and out of rehab and things like that, just all that sadness I felt, and maybe feeling lonely, because it made me feel lonely as well. I think just being able to talk to somebody about that, and to know, just to be able to talk to somebody about that and know it's okay, actually. There's nothing wrong with how I'm feeling, it's normal. That's all I think I would have needed.
A lot of the time, or throughout our kind of conversation, what's really standing out to me is the power of being able to communicate what you're going through with the people around you.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
I've worked with thousands of parents through mentoring their children through bullying, and I've written a book called The Warrior Method about this, and no, sorry, not a victim, about this. And the first thing that happens when a child goes through bullying is a breakdown in communication between the child and the parent. And then what happens is, similar to what you were going through, they don't really have anyone to talk to about it. They often feel guilt or shame about the fact they're going through bullying, because they, especially with young boys as well, they should be strong, they shouldn't be going through this and so on. Or they feel embarrassed, and the young girls feel embarrassed as well about that. So there's that breakdown of communication, and then they don't have anyone to talk to, which then makes them kind of spiral down. It gets worse to the point where it becomes so obvious to the parents they are going through bullying, and then they intervene. Whereas if we had just kind of built the bridge of communication earlier, before children go through something traumatic, by improving the family's communication, they stand so much of a better chance of processing difficult times, or even traumatic times or experiences, right? Yes. Would you agree with that?
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's not rocket science, it's just having these real conversations when they're needed, and not waiting for things to go seriously wrong. Because I know if I'd have had these real conversations, then I would have been a bit about normal things, normal sadnesses and things. Then when I had this trauma, I would have been able to talk about it, because I would have already had the experience. Yeah. But I didn't have any experience of talking about even if I'm feeling sad. Yeah,
it's really important not to dwell on our own sadness and our own negativity. And I think when you're raising kids, especially up to preteen, it's very easy for them to kind of wallow in their own sadness, right? And people enjoy it, even adults. You can see it where they kind of enjoy doing that. And you have two people, like there's a term for it, I can't remember, where they come together and they talk about just the sad things going on in their life. And it's called trauma sharing or something, I can't remember. But essentially it's like, it doesn't really serve anyone. But the fine line there is, you want them to, as a young person, be able to openly talk about it and identify those emotions, and then kind of, just have the open conversation about it, and then be proactive about, okay, I feel those things, but now I'm going to direct my energy into something positive, right? Looking at that from your professional experience, what would you say to parents who want to improve their communication at home with their children?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is avoid extremes as well. Any extremes, I think. So not talking about anything, or over talking or over dwelling, like you said. So the first thing I would say to parents is, well, they need to be honest about themselves with their children as well, because I think that was what was really hard for me and my mum.
As in just sharing what they're going through.
Yeah, exactly, and it's okay to be upset.
You don't need to be this super tough, resilient parent. Somebody showing that you're going through something, and showing an element of weakness, like any good leader. Yeah, vulnerability. Yeah. Exactly.
So my mum, I mean, she's amazing, but she was always laughing and joking, and everything's fine, I'm happy, all of this. But you can, as a child, you can feel.
You just sense it.
Exactly, you sense everything. So it wasn't matching. So I was like, okay, so being sad is not allowed, but it's just not spoken about. So I think, speak about all of the emotions that you're feeling, and ask your child how they're feeling. Let them share. And just listen. Yeah. Step back and listen. And I think just having those conversations about your emotions can change.
I think that's such good advice. Being a vulnerable parent, right? Yeah. But then kind of saying, I'm going through this. This is difficult, but watch me overcome it. Yes. And watch me, despite that pain or uncomfortability I'm going through, watch me take that energy and put it into something constructive and positive. Yeah. I think that's a really powerful step, really, because children are constantly watching us, right? And they're copying what we do, even subconsciously. Yeah. The way in which we speak to a waiter, or anyone who's the cleaner, or the teacher at school, or their friends or the family, whoever it is, they're always watching.
That's true.
And I think they're also watching in the way in which we self-talk.
Exactly.
And the way in which we talk about ourselves and the way in which we process things personally. And I think that if you're in a position where you can, where your children are watching that, then it's kind of your duty and responsibility to make sure that they've got something to mirror, you know, which is, and resilience isn't and courage isn't the absence of fear and the absence of uncomfortability and trauma. It's doing something regardless of that, right? And it's choosing, you know, not a victim is saying, I've gone through something difficult or traumatic, but I'm not going to let it identify me and dictate my life. You know, I've gone through that, but now I'm going to live a life like this because I know that's the most positive outcome of the situation, right?
Yeah, exactly, and all feelings are valid. No, I love that, what you said. I think, that's exactly it. It's not about dwelling and too much either.
So communication at home, massively, massively important. You work primarily with teenagers, is that right?
Yes, I do work with primary as well, but mainly teenagers,
What are the kind of biggest challenges teenage kids who are expats in the UAE in particular face?
I don't know, I've spoken to a lot of teenagers and it seems they just don't have many friends.
Oh, really? Is that maybe because it's such a transient place, or?
I'm not sure, but I feel like it's really sad. Like, I just work with a lot and they just say, I don't have any friends, and then they feel alone. It could be because maybe they haven't been at the school that long, but you think teenagers meet friends quite quickly. Maybe they don't, I don't know. But loneliness seems to be a big problem. Loneliness and maybe, not fitting in. But it's all the same. Loneliness, not fitting in, not having many friends, maybe being bullied as well. So it's being alone. And I can't think of anything worse if you're at school and you're alone.
Yeah.
It's loneliness.
I wonder if things like COVID have made it worse as well, because if you imagine, 1 or 2 years of lockdowns and e-learning, all this sort of stuff, it just kind of forced kids to not necessarily develop those social skills, right? You take a child out of a social situation for 2 years, their ability to walk into a room and make friends is going to be massively impacted, even for adults. Right?
Exactly.
And you imagine half the kids are introverts anyway, and they find that uncomfortable anyway. Now give them 2 years where they don't have to do it, and everything can just be online.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely got to have an influence on that.
Definitely, of course. Yeah, and social media, of course. So we're spending more time isolated anyway, but then, like you said, because of the pandemic and if you're only a teenager, you haven't got a lot of experience.
Yeah. What would you say is the solution there then? What can we do?
I think, it's effective communication, like I was saying. You need to be in your teens, talk to your teens, let them speak. What can we do? I think effective communication. I know I keep talking about that, but I think that's the key, because if you have a good relationship with your teen, they're going to come to you and ask you questions when they maybe having a difficult time online or something, or being bullied. Like, if you don't have that relationship with your teenager, you're not going to know what they're really going through, and then you can't help them. I've worked with a lot of teenagers where luckily they've had good relationships with their parents, and their parents have helped them, get out of possibly dangerous situations online. But if they hadn't had that effective communication, then there's no way they would know. Yeah, who knows what would have happened? Online can be dangerous if you're using I don't know, wrong platforms, dangerous platforms, and you don't know what you're doing. So I think it's all about the communication.
So if you've got a teenager who has just expressed to you that they feel lonely at school, they don't really have many friends, what would your advice be to the parents then at that stage?
See, when I'm coaching with the teenager, I think just obviously letting them speak and saying, it's okay that you're feeling this, because I think sometimes it takes them a while to actually tell me that they're feeling lonely. They don't want to, because you feel ashamed when you feel lonely, don't you? So I think just when they can start talking about it, that's when they're going to be okay, because they've identified it. They're not ashamed of it, they've accepted it. And I think once they start accepting their emotions, then we can work through them. I'll ask them questions, once they start feeling more confident, so they accept their emotions, and then gradually they start accepting themselves, and then they feel more confident. And then normally when they feel more confident, they will more likely take actions to meet new friends or do different things. So I really do believe it starts with identifying the emotions first. With the parents, I think it's just about accepting their teen as well and having the conversation again. I know it sounds really simple, but
it's the root of everything, isn't it? I mean, communication. Yeah. What are the kind of key questions when you've got a child in front of you or a preteen or a teen in front of you who isn't particularly happy, and you're trying to improve that communication? What are the questions you ask? Because I know a lot of parents the kid would come home from school and the questions would be, what did you learn today at school, or what did you do today at school? And for a lot of the time, the kids are just like, I don't want to talk about that. How can you access them? Because for a lot of parents, that's the struggle, right?
I think you probably have to start by, talking about something that your teen is interested in.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And if you don't know, ask them.
Yeah.
So talk about what they're interested in, what they love. So talk about those things first.
You've got to break the ice with something.
Yes.
So if they're into playing Xbox, then just have a 10-minute conversation about Xbox, and then suddenly they'll open a book, right? It would be much easier to have that conversation.
Exactly. Or let's have a game together. Like spend 15 minutes doing something with them on Xbox. Yeah.
What a great way to just break the ice and to an open conversation, right? I think it's something we overlook so much. We assume that because they're family, they should just be really open and honest about everything, but you need to have that kind of rapport.
I think so.
Yeah, so I think that's great advice. To access your child, you need to level with them on something that they enjoy as well, right? So you both kind of start off with that as the foundation.
I think so, and then I guess it would happen naturally. You can say, what do you need right now, or what's important about that, or how do you feel about this? Ask them their opinions as well, and listen, and don't try to say, oh no, that's not okay, or don't do that. Just sit back and ask them, what can I do to help you, or what do you need? And I think listen, and they probably will figure out what they need to do themselves if you just step back and let them speak. Because normally when we speak, we figure out what we need to do, don't we? We just need someone to listen.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is to do with not judging when they do come up with something, right?
Exactly.
I think it's a male thing as well. Like you can be listening to your wife or your partner or whatever, and they'll say something, and you just want to use your logic brain just to resolve the problem. Yeah. When really that's the last thing they want, right? They just want someone to listen to whatever it is they are talking about, and I think for a lot of people that's who are kind of approaching every conversation logically.
We all do that.
Yeah, it's a kind of classic issue, rather than just saying, I'm just listening, and asking the right questions to continue the conversation so they can truly express themselves.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this? Okay, well, why does that upset you? Or do you think you could improve it by doing this, or have you tried that? Or and just letting people evolve the conversation.
Exactly. That's why I love coaching, because it's all about questions and listening.
Rather than giving your opinion as a coach or as a parent, it's just about extracting the information so that it doesn't spiral downward into some sort of negative trauma, right?
Exactly. And when the teens or adults start finding the answers themselves, that actually boosts their confidence. Yeah. Because they're like, oh yeah, I can figure this out. Yeah. So that actually helps them spiral up. Yeah. So it's simple things.
Brilliant. I think that's fantastic. So we've covered a lot. We've covered your childhood. We've covered the impact of a father figure from a young age. We've covered the processing trauma. We've covered effective communication at home. We've covered how to improve communication at home to prevent a negative cycle appearing with your child, things like bullying or processing trauma, that sort of stuff. In terms of your work with confidence with children, do you have any sort of just really practical things that parents can do with their kids, or even the children can do on their own to help improve their confidence? Is there any sort of tips or tricks that you help to kind of use there?
So yeah, with teenagers, like we were saying, or with any teenagers, adults, it does start from how they're talking to themselves. So being aware of what they're saying to themselves. So what I normally start with teenagers, depending on many things, but when you go to the mirror in the morning, because they all look in the mirror, what are you saying to yourself? So, and sometimes, a lot of the time actually, the teenagers that I work with, they're saying, oh, I don't look good, or look at me, or I look a mess, whatever they're saying. So just to get them to start realizing and being conscious of what they're saying to themselves. and it's okay, whatever you're saying to yourself, it's okay, don't worry. But what would you like to say to yourself? So you can start off with like fun affirmations, you can put on the mirror or something.
So literally write affirmations on the mirror.
Yeah.
Saying the same thing time after time after time.
Yeah, and it's never what I would say on the mirror. I ask them and they use their cool language or whatever, and I think...
Do you have any examples of?
Well, I just remember another teenager, she wrote, "I am swag."
Oh, really?
That, honestly, that literally...
Just sparked something in her.
That changed her life.
How interesting, yeah.
She couldn't raise her hand in class. She was doing really badly with her grades and everything. She started doing that.
I am swag.
Yeah, it made her conscious. And fast forward 6 months, she was organising a prom for 80 students.
Wow.
Imagine. And that's how it started.
From low confidence to the centre of the social hub, right?
Yeah, because then she started being nice to herself.
Yeah, the power of words.
Yeah, and the power of being conscious.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, I remember I used to look in the mirror and say awful things, but you don't realise because you just do it automatically, don't you? So being conscious.
The thing I think is quite cool about affirmations, especially people with low confidence, is your mind is always thinking and you're always hearing your own voice. So give your own voice something to say. You say the same thing 10 times in the morning to yourself in a mirror, and without realising it, for the next 6 hours, it will just be in the back of your head.
Yeah.
And it's then associating that feeling you get when you say it with a time where you kind of need that energy, and then leveraging that.
Yeah.
But there's a huge layer of subconscious going on, isn't there? Like I said, it's that voice is always going on in your head. Give it something to think about.
Exactly. And have fun. And she would make, that teenager, she would make cakes about, what she loves, so just enjoying yourself and doing things that you love.
Yeah.
But I think it starts with the self-talk. What you're saying. That was, extremely powerful. Yeah. It has been extremely powerful.
Awesome. Jasmine, amazing to have you on. Really, really just a fascinating conversation. And thank you for being so open and honest about your past. And, I think that's going to help a lot of people who are going through something different, but also kind of similar in many ways, right? What's the best way for everyone here to get in touch with you or to learn more about you?
My website, withnava.com, Instagram, withnava, and LinkedIn, Jasmine Navarro.
Amazing. We will stick all of that in the description. So the description of this video, we'll put all those links so you guys can catch up with Jasmine and learn more about her. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the breakthrough area assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the breakthrough area assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.